Welcome back to Fight News Now, and at this point we are going to hear from heavyweight Junior Dos Santos, who this past week it was announced will be headlining during the UFC's first card in Croatia on April the 10th as he meets Big Ben Rothwell. Here's the former heavyweight champion discussing this matchup.
Well, I think they said some things about Arlovsky and Travis Brownie, but I think they can't because they are not able to fight now. But Ben Rothwell was the guy that accepted, and right now it's the only thing that matters for me, because he, like I said, he living a great moment in the career, and I'm coming from, a tough moment, so it's going to be a great fight for me.
Those are the words of Junior Dos Santos, who meets Ben Rothwell. I'll be honest, I was very surprised that this fight was made. When he mentioned Arlovsky, Travis Brown, those to me were ideas of fights I could see for Junior Dos Santos. Instead, he has the opportunity to completely erase that Alistair Overeem loss. You beat a Ben Rothwell, which I still believe Junior Dos Santos is capable of doing. He springboards himself in that heavyweight division. He still has that victory over Stipe Miocic from not all that long ago. You add Ben Rothwell to the list, and Junior Dos Santos gets pretty much the reset button on his career at heavyweight.
Yeah, but it's going to be a very, very tough fight for JDS. I mean, we've seen it appears that there's a decline in Junior Dos Santos because of the fact that he's taken so much punishment in those fights with Cain Velasquez. And Ben Rothwell just seems to be finding his groove right now, and I think he'll have a solid game plan. I don't think he wants to wrestle. He doesn't want to wrestle Junior Dos Santos. I think he's going to be confident. I think he's going to be try to beat this guy from the outside and try to batter him as much as humanly possible. I think this is a great fight for Ben Rothwell, and if he can manage a victory over the former heavyweight champion, you have to consider him the next guy in line.
That trachea crush that he does there, he calls it the go-go choke. Go-go means in Portuguese, it means Adam's apple. And so he just literally damages your body. But Pollock, you were mentioning to me what Junior had to say about that guillotine.
Right. He was just basically saying, it's a guillotine choke. Yeah. And I mean, not dismissing the submission, but I don't think it's something that, you have to be concerned that Ben Rothwell's been able to pull this off in 2 consecutive fights, but that also brings a target to all his opponents to be prepared for. And Ben Rothwell has a very awkward stance for strikers to deal with. At the same time, this is also a 5-round fight. How much is that going to affect Ben Rothwell in this particular fight?
I mean, obviously it's going to be an issue. Junior Dos Santos has experience fighting in those type of fights. But again, it comes down to the damage. We've seen over the years, miles really means something, and I think for Junior Dos Santos, it's more evident than maybe most fighters at the heavyweight limit.
That takedown against Mark Hunt that we saw right there, oh God, he's got some great highlights. Hey, that takedown against Mark Hunt, do not write that off as a possibility against Junior. And the reason I'd say that is because we don't think Junior doesn't really prioritize wrestling. That might change now, training in Florida, but he likes to get in and get his hands on you, and he's done well doing that. So for him, if you are Rothwell, you're not super concerned with that, so you want to introduce that. Make him think about 2 things, and you only have to think about 1. Also, if he defends that takedown, you show him that thing ain't a guillotine. Does it help him? Does he benefit by minimizing the threat of that guillotine? Now, he might just be saying that in the press, but if he's thinking, no big deal, it's just a guillotine, I can get out of it, you don't want to find out that's not true when your trachea is being destroyed by Ben Rothwell. It's a very interesting fight. It's a very fun fight, and you're right. I'm surprised that Junior gets it, but it's a great chance.
And he also mentioned in the interview the fact that 1 year off, he thought that was way too much time off for him. He did have injuries to deal with, but he just felt that going into that fight, there was just a lot of things that weren't clicking for him like other fights. So he gets a much quicker turnaround this time coming up on April the 10th. And this kind of is making a bit more of a clearer picture in the heavyweight division. It very much appears that Fabricio Werdum and Stipe Miocic is going to be the fight May the 14th. And it leaves Cain Velasquez somewhat on the sidelines here as he recovers from back surgery, and that was his title fight.
Yeah, I'll be honest, when we were in Las Vegas, we talked to Cain, and it doesn't really seem like he cares. I think that, he won the championship. Everybody knows his name. When he's ready to come back, if the UFC puts him in a title fight, great. If it's just fights against some of the other top heavyweights.
What are the range of Cain Velasquez emotions that you have seen
I know.
in his entire career?
It's funny because we did, when Wei and I and George were at AKA, there was times where he was he was smiling and he got comfortable, and it's like, oh, okay.
Then he saw you.
Yeah, then he saw me.
Yeah.
And then, but then you see him in Vegas, and his approach to things was very similar to Donald Cerrone. And well, this is what I do. I go and I train. Hopefully I don't have any injuries. If I do, I recover, and whenever the UFC has a fight for me, great. If it's for the heavyweight championship, my goal is for it to be for the heavyweight championship. But if it's not, I'll get a couple of wins, and eventually I'll be fighting for the title. And that's really the case for Cain. He comes out, whether he's fighting Fabrizio Werdum, or he's fighting Ben Rothwell, or he's fighting somebody else. He goes, that's who I deal with. I'll finish those guys, and eventually I'll be fighting for the title.
In the highlights we just saw, we showed Werdum wrapping up that guard and getting Cain and choking him. And, like I said, with Big Ben being able to offer up the extra threat of the takedown, Werdum kind of takes that takedown away from you. As a result, when he's fighting Cain Velasquez, Werdum has the threat of the ground and the stand-up, and Velasquez has to become a bit of a striker. And Velasquez, without that extra threat, it's easier to be able to, or you've got a better chance to beat him on the feet, push him into attacking you, wrap up the guillotine. Against Stipe Miocic has much better mobility, much better footwork. And if we're talking about Dominic Cruz, we're talking about Stephen Thompson, we're talking about Conor McGregor, we're talking about that awesome couple of rounds from Condit. I mean, movement is what's going on right now. Some guys are moving well, and if they're moving well against guys who are not, watch the footwork here, just stepping out on different angles, even in the pocket. Guys who are moving their feet and creating new angles and new in and outs, new rhythm and new timing are beating guys who cannot do that. Stipe Miocic at heavyweight is one of these guys.
I think this is really good for Cain Velasquez, the fact that he doesn't have to now rush back if they were dangling this title fight for him in May. He has the ability now to fully recover from this back surgery that he has and maybe have a 3-round fight before that time. Maybe you place him with a Josh Barnett, which would be a great fight, and is something that he's training at a high level, but not necessarily for a 5-round championship fight, which his body has gone through many a camp for. Now, with Stipe Miocic, who we're earmarking for this May 14th title fight, I think this has worked out very well for Miocic in the sense that now he does get a full camp to train for Fabrizio Werdum. He's going to be in a very high-profile position in May at UFC 198, and he's now going to be the best he can possibly be as opposed to taking this fight on very short notice, which he would have if he had stepped in to replace Velasquez.
Yeah, but I don't think he cared. I think he was ready. He believed that he was destined to get a shot at.
No one cares beforehand, but then after a terrible performance, it's always, I didn't have enough time.
That's true, but
hindsight's a bitch.
Yes, but we've heard it is what it is. This is what you're presented, and it's what do I say? No, Henry Cejudo. Do we believe that Henry Cejudo is going to go and beat Demetrius Johnson? No, we all believe that he is still a few years away from his development of where he needs to be. He knows that. His coaches know that. But the fact is, this is the opportunity that's presented. You're fighting for the UFC. For him, it's the flyweight championship. For Stipe, it was the heavyweight championship. You take the opportunity because one injury and your career could be done. You take the fights when they're offered.
For sure, and the waiting thing doesn't work for anybody. When's the last time call up Tyron Woodley and see how he's doing with that. That's just not, you're right. Now, that doesn't mean you're at your best. Stipe was taking that fight, ready to go, and he was going to fight it in the situation that he was in. But yeah, this is better. Yeah. This is way better. Now you go in, game planning for this guy, running sequences specific for him. He's got an underrated, underappreciated coaching staff because they turned him into a very, very elite athlete. This is a heavyweight who moves like a featherweight. And if he's going to win this fight, that's going to be the key. Move your feet well, defend the takedowns in the traditional sense and in position, and strike him on angles.
As I'm thinking now, who one of the biggest winners of that whole Werdum Velasquez injury and fallout, one of the biggest winners of this whole thing is Vitor Belfort, who now gets Jacare in a 3-round fight as opposed to a 5-round fight. Right. And that greatly enhances Vitor's chances against Jacare. Still, I don't think many will be picking Vitor, but believe me, him going 25.
I totally get it, but it's still Jacare standing across the cage from you, who we've seen the damage that this guy can do.
This guy tagged Chris Weidman. Yeah. I never write him out.
I think Jacare is amazing, and you're right. It will benefit Vitor Belfort, but Belfort's been in this game for a long time as well. I mean, if it's 25 minutes, it's 25 minutes. You're right. 3 rounds is better for Vitor because of his age and so on and so forth, but it doesn't matter. It's whatever the UFC lays out for you, that's the game you got to play.
Yeah, and you got to win in the situation with the criteria that you're facing.
Let's wrap this up with a look at the heavyweight rankings because it's all over the place. We've been throwing out all these names at you. Fabricio Werdum sits atop, and there Cain Velasquez staying at number 1 in our FightNetwork.com rankings, and Stipe Miocic ranked 5th, but it looks like he will be the one to get the next title fight. I'm curious where Alistair Overeem fits in all of this because his status is the most interesting, because if he is to re-sign with the UFC, one has to imagine he could possibly leapfrog Cain Velasquez, or that could be Cain Velasquez's next opponent if we're looking at a 3-round fight.
Well, I think,
Boom.
I think that's it. I think Alistair Overeem, I don't know if this time next year, if he's going to be with UFC.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they have the right to match, though, so if he gets an offer that the UFC can meet, they'll match it because he's valuable.
That is going to wrap it up for us, but be sure to catch 5 Rounds with Robin Black and John Ramdeen every Monday night, dissecting all of the issues going on in mixed martial arts at 8 p.m. Eastern.